through our department. Oh, and the recording has started in case you want to click that box away. So the first thing I want to highlight here on the next slide is covering just some basics of off-campus housing for students at American University. So the first thing that's really important to know, there's some transitions on the slide, so just bear with us. So the first thing that you want to know if you're unfamiliar with the area is that American University is located in Ward 3. So that puts our campus near kind of major neighborhoods such as Tenleytown, Friendship Heights, Spring Valley, Cathedral Heights neighborhoods. Most of our students are living in the areas kind of directly around American University. So when you're looking at apartment buildings or rentals, that's the kind of 20016 area, which is our Tenleytown, Cathedral Heights, as well as Glover Park, Georgetown, a little bit less, and then a couple of students in Van Ness, Cleveland Park. Most students who are living off campus do live with others. So about 71% of our students that we polled are living with others. And about half of those students are just living with one other person. So people aren't, living with 10 people, they're just living with one other roommate. And then 80% of students that are living off campus live in an apartment. So a lot of people are looking kind of, by campus and at apartment buildings. And I just like to highlight in the poll that we did this past spring. So our average monthly rent for students renting off campus is about $14.82 per person. And just to kind of break that out, because it's a little bit different if you're living alone, it's just under $2,000, whereas students that are living with others, whether that's that one roommate or multiple roommates, is about $13.25. So now that we kind of have the stage set of where people are living and what they're kind of living and what it costs them, just thinking about kind of factors to consider while you are searching for your off-campus accommodations. So the first thing our students are looking for is location and proximity, asking yourself, is it walkable? Does it have easy access to transportation? At AU, which I always like to mention that, if you're a full-time student, you have the lovely U Pass, able to kind of jump on the metro or jump on the bus for free. So maybe that's an option for your student. You also want to see if that location is easy access to other places. So can you get on a bus or get on the metro to go to your job or your internship? That is really important for your student. So thinking about those things. And then also, lastly, thinking about your necessities in life, grocery stores, restaurants, banks, things that your student will need on the day-to-day basis while they're living at that maybe apartment or house. And then also when you think about other factors, another one is cost. So thinking about what your budget is, and not only thinking about this is where I live and this is my budget, but thinking about, utilities, food and transportation and that cost as well. Asking yourself if you're okay with sharing a room or an apartment, which then would reduce the cost. So thinking about, those cost saving measures. And then when you actually find a place, seeing if the rent includes any utilities or amenity costs in the rental price, or if those are on top of your kind of base rent. So it just kind of fluctuates what you may be able to afford. And then lastly, thinking about what is the security deposit? Is there an application fee? What does that look like for that particular rental? So you can kind of understand if the security deposit is refundable or non-refundable when you leave, what does that look like, and kind of understanding that. Some other considerations that I just like to kind of push out there that maybe you're not thinking of, just thinking of what are you looking for an off-campus rental? Is it on-site laundry? Is it maybe updated unit or appliances? Is it a private bedroom? Is it carpet? It can be kind of anything that's on your list. And then also what you're looking for in a potential roommate. So sometimes people, move off campus and they have, 3 or 4 friends that they already know they want to live with, but others maybe don't have that because their friend is studying abroad or is already kind of committed to another group that's living off campus. So what are you looking for in your potential roommate? Are you looking for a best friend, or are you looking for someone to just, be able to live in the same space with that, keeps a similar schedule and things like that? And then also last thing is just looking at the lease of what does that look like? Is it a 12-month lease? Is it month to month? Is it a sublet? What other kind of, lease terms do you have available to you? Here we go. So the first place that I want to highlight to help you search for properties is our off-campus housing website. So we run this website in partnership with apartments.com, but it's kind of behind a barrier for just American University students. So only AU students can access this site to see apartment buildings, sublets, and rentals that people are advertising directly for our students. Want to highlight just kind of some like safety measures on here. All of the landlords and apartment buildings must provide proof of basic business license, which in the District of Columbia is required to rent your property out. So that is vetted through the system before anyone can post on the site. So that's just kind of our kind of due diligence on that. But as you can see on the screen, you can search for active listings based off of price, location, and other criteria, and also kind of see in relation to AU where that might fall. One of the reasons why this site is also really nice is that if you pull up a listing, it will actually tell you like the distance to campus and different transportation methods to get there. So whether it's walking or if there's a bus or a train. So that's really nice to kind of be able to see that, whereas other sites might not have that, right away, be able to show you that. And the other really nice thing about this site is that if you are looking for a roommate, students can kind of post like a kind of blog style about me in the roommate section, where you can kind of see other AU students that are also looking for roommates, and you can kind of connect with them through the system. You can find them and kind of say, what's your price range? Where are you looking to live? And then be able to have a roommate that way. So again, this site is only for American University students. You have to have an @american.edu email to even sign up. So that roommate portion is really nice for students who may not have a person in mind. But while we're kind of thinking of searching for properties, obviously our site, we want you to utilize that the most, but knowing full well that you will utilize other resources. I think apartments.com is a great place to start, at least to see kind of what is out there. It's a great kind of tool to be able to see all of the different variety of, listings that are in the district. Google Maps is really great if you know what neighborhood you are interested in, but maybe don't know specific apartment building names. So just being able to kind of go to the area, zoom in, and kind of see what apartment buildings are in the area, and then going to kind of shift your search afterwards. And then also Facebook groups. I know the students nowadays aren't utilizing Facebook as much anymore, but in DC, the sublet and rental Facebook groups are very, very active nowadays. People are, I'm still in a couple of groups as a DC resident myself, so I see that people are still posting constantly about, basement sublets and things like that all the time. So if your student doesn't use Facebook as much anymore, maybe have them reboot it and jump on some of those Facebook groups to be able to search for some of those options. We'll go to the next. So some just more general tips for just kind of searching for an apartment. So typically it's recommended that you start looking 90 days prior to your move-in date. So for some of your students, you may be looking for like an August 1 move-in date, maybe like ahead of the semester, but maybe, early to mid-August. So you're kind of thinking for the fall. So that would put us kind of around May is when you want to start kind of looking around, putting feelers out with different apartment buildings to see what is available, because just kind of background, most apartment buildings, especially large ones, will ask their tenants, hey, do you intend to renew your lease about 60 to 90 days in advance? And so at that time, they'll have a good idea of what units will be coming available around your move-in date. One of the greatest resources is the DC Tenant Rights and the Office of the Tenant Advocate. So this is a fantastic office in DC that's really, really great for tenants. I like to say DC is great for tenants if you know your rights. So I highly, highly recommend you visit the Tenant Rights website. You kind of see what that office does for you, but it kind of helps tenants in the instances of your landlord breaking your lease for some reason, or kind of providing support in those instances. I know a lot of students are probably getting ready to head home, or maybe not in the DC area over the summer. So it's really important just to know that a lot of apartment buildings now have on-demand virtual tours, or they'll do a virtual walkthrough, over Zoom, just like this. You just need to ask. Most of the time, they're really, really accommodating. So if your student isn't in the area over the summer and they need to kind of, have more face-to-face interaction, I highly recommend that they, simply ask, send them an email and say, hey, I'm really interested in this particular unit or this apartment building. Would you be willing to walk me through it? And they'll be really accommodating for that. And then something that Justin will kind of touch on later, but once you find a place, be a good neighbor. So learn about the neighborhood, introduce yourself to your next door neighbor to kind of, create that community. So even though you're not on AU's campus, you can still kind of build that community within wherever you're living.
Thanks, Kaylee. That's a great segue to, oh, sorry. You have one more slide.
We were very close. Just one note of how your student can sign up on the off-campus posting site. So either you can go to our website, american.edu/housing, or you can go directly to the off-campus housing site, which is just offcampus.american.edu or .com. And all you have to do is click sign up at the top. You have to kind of put in some basic information. Again, use your AU email to sign up, and it will ask you just some basic information about your move-in dates to kind of help filter your results. And then you'll be able to kind of complete your registration. From there, you can also make your roommate profile, upload a photo, upload a little bio, and then search for other roommates that are already in the system. And that's kind of, your 5-minute registration is really quick and easy. And all the information is on our website on the off-campus resources tab, if you need that. Now I will hand it over to Justin.
Thanks, Kaylee. I'm so excited to talk about supporting students, but I took over your last slide. I'm Justin Bernstein, and I am the interim dean of students. And in the Office of the Dean of Students, we oversee student support, outreach, student accountability, and restorative practices. If you go to the next slide, the way that we support our off-campus students, it primarily is through an off-campus student orientation that every student who is living in the zip codes surrounding the AU campus, which is currently the 20008 and 20016 zip codes, is required to complete. And this orientation covers safety and security, living in the neighborhood, things like how do we do things in DC in terms of bulk trash pickup? How do you proactively build relationships with your neighbors? How to maintain and keep up your property in DC, for example, when it snows and you rent a house, you are responsible for clearing the snow in front of your property, not your landlord. So little tips like that can help students have a more successful experience living off campus. And we also provide university and local resources. The Good Neighbor policy, which Kaylee referenced, actually applies to all of our students, whether they're living on campus or off campus. And all students are actually proactively saying that they agree to it when they register for classes. So, it's pretty much being a good neighbor. Like, hopefully you've helped your students learn how to be good people all of this time, but being mindful about noise, understanding what the quiet hours are in DC, and being respectful in terms of parking and trash pickup and things like that. You can go on to the next slide. Our expectation is that our students, when they're living off campus, are going to be respectful of our neighbors and be good members of our DC or local community, wherever it is that they're living, and really represent the type of student that we expect AU students to be. I've been doing this work in the Dean of Students office for about 4 years, and for the most part, our students who live off campus have very good experiences and are really good stewards and good citizens. But there are always those things that happen. And so my office really tries to be supportive of students as we navigate any issues that do arise with neighbors or landlords. The goal is to have the first conversation be educational, to talk about tools and resources that can help them be more successful and more proactive in their living off campus. But if problems persist, obviously we have the student code of conduct, which all students have to adhere to, whether they're on or off campus. And so if we have to go down that road, we will. But I would say 99% of the time, these things are resolved through an educational conversation with either myself or somebody on the dean of students staff. You can go to the next slide. And so when students do live off campus, they complete the off-campus orientation and they are proactively asked to affirmatively sign this pledge that they are going to adhere to these standards. So a way that you as the family member supporting our students who are living off campus can support us is making sure that they've updated their address in the portal so that we know where they live, and we're able to administer this orientation to them so they have those resources. The goal isn't to be punitive. It takes about 30 minutes at the most to complete the orientation, but it really does have some really important information, and it can really head off a lot of challenges that students might face their first time being, the ones who are responsible for kind of representing the household when they're living off campus. And I think that's it for me.
So next we were going to have our student speaker. Unfortunately, we were having some technical difficulties with her and her connection, so she won't be able to join. But we will have Scott being our next speaker, talking about his experience as a parent, and also I'm sure he can share some of his Eagles experience when he was looking for off-campus housing and get some perspective there too. So I think we'll go right into Scott.
Well, hello, everybody. Just wanted to say very proudly, this is the first year since 2003 that I have not had a student in any type of actual school. My younger son, Henry, graduated last May from American University, is gainfully employed, and lives on Mass Avenue using his degree. So I will let you know there is good life after all of this. College bills stopped going away. First, I want to tell you real quick about American Chill. American Chill is a parents and family and adult supporter Facebook group. No students, but people basically, do you know, love, like, and give all of your money to somebody who is at American University. And we share life together in a chill way. Chill does not mean that we do not care, that we are not concerned, that everything is happy-go-lucky. It's just that we share the joys, the successes, and even the challenges together in a way that is proportional, that we really try to make sure that we help move our children from children. They're always our children, but from being actual children to fully functioning adults, and some great strategies that we discuss in the group. Feel free to join the group. It's, again, American Chill on Facebook. A few questions you need to answer. If you don't get a response and put into the group immediately, look at your inbox, your Facebook inbox. I may have a couple of questions. You may have just want to make sure we have folks who do have a relationship with the university, including some of our group experts who are the parents of alumni, who are giving advice on things like job searches and how those things have worked out for the new graduates. A couple of things I wanted to talk about is my first big worry. I remember when it was orientation, we were on campus, and I first heard that American University only guaranteed on-campus housing through a student's sophomore year. And I just felt my heart sink, because I was thinking, how do you find an apartment in Washington, D.C.? What are rents going to be like? This is absolutely, I don't know. And I was dreading this, what I thought 2 years ahead of schedule. Little did I know that my son would decide and make a successful case for moving off campus for his sophomore year. We agreed to that, and then COVID hit. He was able to acquire his first apartment. He lived in the Greenbrier. No, I'm sorry, lived in the Berks. from Nashville, from our home, because everyone was taking classes remotely. That's how easy the process is. Don't worry about it, because what surrounds a university campus? Off-campus housing owned and managed by people who are used to working with the needs and the calendars and the budgets of university students and their families. So he was able to navigate that. First time he walked into his apartment was 2 months after he had signed a lease, and a week before he started classes that online that August. The next apartment he had to give up his apartment when he went overseas for study abroad. He was able to find an apartment and a new roommate from Chisinau, Moldova, which is just absolutely amazing. So here I was, before he came to campus, thinking this was going to be a horrible process, and this was such a good and smooth process that he was able to do it 8 time zones away. And we didn't even know he had a roommate in a new apartment until he asked if he could use the scanner to send in his signed lease for the new apartment. The first measure of readiness, there's lots of things to talk about. We talk about on Chill, and one of the things that come up is we follow a model, kind of the I do, we do, they do. That sort of thing is as our children get older and develop responsibilities and more abilities, they see what we do, and then we work on things together, and then they do things themselves. So that first time, my kid took the lead on finding an apartment. Where were good places to live? What were the rough rents? Who were his roommates going to be? What was his budget going to be? He handled that, but what I did was I just reviewed things before he signed them. I coached him on questions to ask the people when he was calling and doing this, because the first big measure of readiness, if your student is ready to live off campus, is can they take lead and handle some of the lifting of finding that off-campus housing? Because if they can't negotiate the lease, if they can't ask the questions that they need to know about living there and what the expectations are and finding the roommate and working the things out with the roommate, they're not going to have the skills they need to live off campus. It's going to be a little tougher time for them to work with that. But I think that's one of those things, again, while you're working with off-campus housing surrounding a university, you're working with people, whether it is a company or you're subletting a portion of a home or you're renting from a condo owner. They know what college students need. They know what college students are like. They know what the process, they know what the calendar, they know what the budgets and the expectations are. So there really is a good market for housing surrounding American University, designed for students of American University. A couple of things to talk about in the lease is, when does the lease actually start? And you think about it starting in August, and since so many of the leases are on a 12-month term, we didn't worry so much about that. His first lease started in June, signed it in May to be in effect in June, because if you're doing a 12-month window, and you're not going to be using it during the summer, the question is, do you want to have it empty the summer before you move in and you're paying rent for it? Or do you want to have it be empty the 2 months of the summer after you move out and come back home or graduate and start your life somewhere else? Fortunately, you can often negotiate with when those leases are going to start. We were very fortunate that those first 2 months, we were able to negotiate them as free months. So even though we weren't occupying the apartment, if there was a lease, and we're able to handle that. Another question is, how do you handle extensions? That's something good to know at the very beginning. When that lease is over, do you go month to month? Will you have the option to go to month? Will it cost more to go month to month? Could you go for another semester and handle on a semester by semester basis? Will they give you the right to sublet? If you do study abroad, there's likelihood for an entire semester, and the summer on either side of that semester, that apartment could be empty if you decide to keep the apartment. Does the person leasing the apartment or condo to you allow you to sublet? And what are the rules for that? And what are the expectations for that? One thing I think is overlooked a lot is parking. Just because you see a parking lot does not mean that there's a parking space. Does the apartment include parking? How many parking spaces? A condo It's even tougher because often the condos sell parking spaces when they sell the units. And so while one unit may be rented out by somebody who owns 2 spaces, the one next door for the exact same price may be rented out by somebody who only owns 1 space. And then the other thing that catches a lot of people, including my family, off guard are the parking rules in DC. Just because there are on-street parking does not mean that an American University student can park on the street, even if they are renting a room or a condo or an apartment in a house on that street. There are certain rules that have to deal with on-street parking that will require your student to actually have registration and a license in DC. And that's part of the good neighbor policy. American University will tell your students about that, but that's a question you have to ask. Where will my student park? How much will it cost? And what will they do if parking is not available? The first thing to do when you move in is reach out to your neighbors, especially when you're going to some of these buildings like the Berks and Greenbrier and 4000 Mass Ave. You're going to have multi-generational families and tenants, including some grandparents and some retirees who may have lived in that building for 40 years. And you may not advise your student to reach out when they move in. Go knock on the door, introduce yourself, give a name, give a telephone number if you need to give a telephone number. Because what's going to happen is you may never have another conversation again with that neighbor, but that neighbor knows who you are. And should you need to have that conversation, should something happen to your student is going to be more comfortable to go and knock on that door. Likewise, that neighbor is going to be more likely to come and knock on your student's door if they need help. And it really just sets seeds. Same thing with staff. Have every opportunity you can to encourage your student to reach out to the staff that works in these complexes. Treat them like people, give them the respect that they do, be thankful for the work that they do. And not just because it's the right thing to do, but also when it's time to come and say, hey, can I extend the lease? Can I go month to month? Can I, they're going to see you as people as well. And it's going to be easier for them to recognize it's easier to keep a good tenant, a known good tenant, than it is to bring in someone new who's unknown, even if that new tenant may be paying more. With roommates, it's very much conversations and the expectations are like they are if they're living on campus. Who keeps, are you neat? Are you an early riser? Do you study? Do you have a lot of friends over? Do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend over? And how much time are they going to stay there? Are they going to basically live in the apartment or just kind of come by from time to time? But a couple of things to consider is there is no RA. There is no housing department. There really is no formal process to handle these resolutions. They're going to have to be prepared to have these discussions ahead of time and help set expectations with their roommate because there's not the resources that they would have living on campus. This is one that's really big and I think can be overlooked. If your student's living on campus in a double in a dorm room, and their roommate leaves the university by choice or because of circumstances, and your student is suddenly finding themselves living in one bed of a 2-bedroom or 2-bed dorm, American University is not going to come to them and say, oh, you now live in a single, we're going to start charging you single rates. No, you're still going to continue paying the double rates for the dorm. But if you have a roommate who's paying half the rent and next month they're not there, landlord's still going to expect the full month's rent to be paid. So that's something that needs to be discussed, and you need to have preparation for that. What happens if the roommate moves out? What happens if the roommate is still there but doesn't pay the rent? How do you handle those things? Are you prepared to have another roommate come in? These are questions to ask your kids, and so they can know. How do you discuss? You know when you're supposed to discuss with your landlord when you're going to be moving out, but when do you have those discussions with your roommates? How soon do they need to tell you what their intentions are for the next year or the next semester? Because you can't assume just because a student wants to stay in the condo or the apartment that their roommate wants to do the same. And they don't want to be caught in a situation to where deadlines have passed for finding on-campus housing or finding other off-campus housing has worked. But here's the real good thing about it. If a student does it right, they can live off campus, have a fuller experience, a better life. They can eat better, they can rest better, they can study better, they can really have a better experience, and it will cost them less than living on campus. And that's going to require them to do some grocery shopping and do some cooking. It's going to require them to stay in a few nights and not, not necessarily go out with have a game night at the apartment. But our experience has been that we were able to save money, and it costs our student less to live off campus than it costs for him to live in an AU dorm. And the final two pieces of advice are, if you can, put the lease in your student's name. Let them be the one to sign it. If you have to, if a utility is required, and the only utilities we ever had to look at for an apartment or the condo was internet. Everything else was covered. They didn't want a landline. In fact, I don't even think some of the buildings even have the landlines anymore, but it was internet. Put that in your student's name. Because what that's going to give them is, when it's time for them to graduate and to move out and get their own apartment, where they don't have their parents co-signing for them or can't use their parents' income as a source of income on the application, suddenly they may have a 2, and in our case, 3-year credit history for being a tenant who pays the rent on time, for being someone who pays utility bills on time. And the final question is where not to get a sofa. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and I will tell you, if you go into a store and buy a guitar new in Nashville, you have just wasted your money, because there's somebody probably within about half a mile of you selling a better guitar for a lower price used. There's always someone in Nashville ready to sell you their old guitar. Likewise, in a town like Washington, especially in Northwest DC around the university campus, but in Washington, a very transient town, people who, because of their profession, may come and live for just a few years before they're assigned someone else. Someone is always ready to sell you a sofa. They will sell it to you on Facebook Marketplace. They will sell it to you on Craigslist. They may actually say, if you just come and get it, you can have it. That's what the best things to do. And don't worry about the furniture that you want, that you would put in your house. Think about it. They're 18, they're 19, they're 21 years old. I think that they basically just want a place that they can sit and they can sleep, and some friends who are visiting can crash if they need to. So we found some really good things. My son was able to find some really good things from his classmates, from people in his church, from Facebook Marketplace, sometimes just finding people who were getting ready to take something down to the dumpster. It wasn't anything wrong with it. It was just not worth paying to store. It was just easier to throw away. And when he moved out after graduation from his apartment, it was amazing. The friends who were helping him move took about half the stuff to the dumpster, and then took about the other half of the stuff to the back of their own cars. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. Feel free to join American Chill. Ask questions you have there. We really do have a good time while we are sharing life successes and some of life's challenges. Thank you.
So much, Scott. We have some resources here that we direct any questions to, but we also have Kaylee's been doing a great job of answering some questions that have come up in the Q&A, and we'll move into the Q&A section here, and I'll direct some particular questions to different panelists. But thank you all so much for sharing your advice and perspectives. We very much appreciate it. So Kaylee, I think you answered a couple Q&A questions, and we had some questions from Zoom about this. But could you talk a little bit about the, I think it's the rolling reapplication period, and sort of how, if any, on-campus housing might open up once we hit end of the semester?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our office just finished up room selection for sophomore and upper division students. And while that process is closed, we immediately jumped into what we call rolling reapplication, which is kind of a self-change and cancellation period that our students will go through the middle of June. So during this time, whether a student decides that, hey, I want to go abroad, or they're graduating early and they no longer need their fall housing, their space will immediately open up to any students that have an active application with us to pick up. So once we get that cancellation, their space will become available to students to then select from. If your student, I was trying to say in the chat, but if your student is still interested on campus housing, we typically see most of our cancellations come through throughout the month of May, as people, finish the semester and start to really think about the fall. So just reiterate to your student, if you want campus housing, please continue to look at the housing portal and, around those cancellation deadlines, which is the first of every month, we typically see kind of an uptick of students canceling before those fee increases go into place. One like little caveat that I like to always just mention is that we might have spaces that become available. It might not be the space that your student wants. So it might not be the apartment style space, because those tend to be the like kind of high ticket item. But we typically, when we get to kind of August, we historically have seen spaces available for both sophomore and upper division students. It's just not in that, highly sought after residence hall.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that we saw that concern among questions, so I'm glad that we can share a little insight into that process and timeline. We got one question that I think Justin might be able to answer. Justin, do you know the timeline on when students have to complete that online orientation for moving off campus? Is that before the semester begins?
That's a great question. So we usually start the process of sending out notifications around the end of ad drop. So after the first weeks of classes, giving students a chance to settle in. And then the deadline's usually about a month after that. So early October-ish. And we send multiple reminders to all the folks who haven't done it. And after the deadline, give them another chance to do it before going through the conduct process. So we have, I think last year we had a 99.6% completion rate. So people do it.
Sweet. Okay. That's good to know that it's once the semester's in swing and students are settled in, they can expect to do that. We had some questions, and I think, Kaylee, you answered some about studying abroad and housing. Would you be able just to speak to that a little more in terms of, obviously subletting for off campus students seems to be an option, but opportunities to be on campus, if you're that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'll start with one that if your student is studying abroad, say in the springtime, and they're off campus in the fall. So our off-campus site does offer students the ability to post their sublets. They just need to create an account like I showed earlier and kind of follow the instructions. It's actually just on the homepage of how they can post their sublet. They don't need the basic business license because they're not the like actual landlord, but they can post it on the site and have it available for other AU students to look at. But if your student will be abroad in the fall and is interested in coming back in the spring and potentially living on campus, we do run a spring only housing application that comes out about mid-October to let the students know, hey, if you're interested in something in the spring, apply, and we'll kind of set you up. If your student is abroad, we actually work directly with the study abroad office to send those communications to them. So your student will get information, but if your student is maybe, renting off campus for some reason and they want to come in the spring, they can either look at our website or they can email us to ask us more information about that spring only application. And typically, because we have generally people coming in and out of, students that are on campus, moving abroad for the spring, and then people coming back, we usually have spaces available that we're able to accommodate most students that want it.
That's great. Great info to know. Scott, I think you answered one question about this in the Q&A, but if you could just talk a little bit about who gets to sign the lease in your experience. I think you said
I think it's the
did.
students. It's straight up the students. Now we've had we had the benefit that I know definitely for the first one, when it came time for sources of income, our son was able to list an amount monthly that we had told him that we would provide towards his housing, and they understand that. But the lease is signed by the student. It's the student. I mean, they're legal adults. They are the person who is living there. They're the person who is the resident of the district, the person who's covered by those housing requirements and those laws. And they're also the person who is accountable to be held accountable for the requirements of that lease. If they don't pay their rent on time, it's not me, it's not the parent. If they get caught making modifications or doing things or being loud, it's them. It's not the parent who's going to get kicked out. And so I think because of the legal requirements and the expectations and the legal protections, it's going to be the student who's going to do that.
Makes sense. We got some questions. I think another one for you, Kaylee. You're on the mic a lot. About summer storage options for students. Do you have any advice, recommendations for that?
Yeah, so the most convenient option is utilizing the UPS store that's on campus. The UPS store is great with our students' belongings. So if your student is currently living on campus, they'll actually pick up the boxes in front of your student's dorm, so they don't have to like lug it down to the UPS store. There's a certain amount of boxes that they get like with the summer storage. And then they can kind of pay a fee if they have additional boxes or items that they want to store. And then when they come back in the summer, before the classes start, they can just pick them up directly from the UPS store and bring them to their place. But that's where we have kind of the most of our students look at that. But obviously, if you want more information on that, it's on our website with kind of additional details. I know they're currently taking reservations still for the summer if you have storage stuff that you don't want to toss and you want to keep it for the next year.
Now, that is a great service, and we use that between my son's freshman year and sophomore year. But one of the things to consider is it doesn't do it won't do furniture, it doesn't do larger services. There is a great storage facility that I found right across the river in Virginia, because the further you get from DC, the further you get from downtown, the less expensive the options are for housing. And a lot of folks in Chill have continued to use that. It's a new facility that, and what I'll do is I will make sure we post that pretty regularly, but I'll go ahead this week and post that on Chill, a link towards that, and you'll find it a pretty affordable option.
Great resources to have. This might be another one for Kaylee. Can students who are off campus still have a meal plan? And do you know how those intersect?
So the short answer is yes. So if you're living off campus, there's no requirement for you to have a meal plan. But if you want it, you can sign up. I believe it's for any of the options that are available. So you can go for like the lowest meal plan amount if you're only on campus a couple times a week and you just want a meal in the terrace dining room, which is going to be now renovated over the summer. So very exciting. And it includes some kind of dining dollars and such. And then they also have, I think you can opt into the full, like, as much as you can eat, at all of the venues on campus. So definitely can sign up for that, but it's not required.
We got a question, this one might be for Scott, about street parking and parking with a car from a different state. Did Henry have any experiences with that, with any of his apartments, or
He did.
just parking?
He had parking at the Berks. He did not have did not have his own parking space when he lived at the Greenbrier. He and his two roommates were renting from an older lady who owned the condo. She owned the condo in one space. They gave the space. They decided among the roommates to give it to the person who had had his own bedroom and was paying the lion's share. Henry fortunately was able to park nearby at his church, at the church parking lot. From time to time he parked on the street, but there are certain times that was just not an option, that he could not do that. So, and there are people who will go and rent a room in a house, and the house has empty curb right out in front, and because the car is not registered in the district, they're not going to be able to park there. So you have to be very, very pointed in the questions. Your students have to be very pointed in the questions they ask about parking. Also, there was a question that came up I can answer about renter's insurance. Yes, on renter's insurance, In fact, I've never known an apartment complex or condo that did not require it, because it's not just a portion of protecting what you have in the apartment. It's also the insurance covers what the resident could end up doing that affects other people. So if there was a fire or water damage or something like that, it's going to be filed against the resident's insurance, not the property owner's insurance.
Yeah, we did have some questions about that, so thank you for shouting that one out. I'm looking, I think we've covered most of the questions we've had. We had some questions about sort of the timeline on leases, which I think, Scott, you were talking about, kind of has to be sort of negotiated probably place to place and see what's available. It's not like there's a standard. There are places that do 12 months, there are places that do month to month, and you might be able to negotiate something in between. Is that your experience?
That's been the experience. And also, if you can ask for an 18-month, if you want to do something like that, if you recognize it. But really, the thing I didn't get hung up on, I've said it earlier and I'll repeat it. If you're signing a 12-month lease and you're only going to be there for 10 months or 9 months, it doesn't really matter if it starts in May or if it starts in August, except the question is, where are you going to be during the summer? If you want to be in DC the summer before the lease starts, have it start then. But if you think I'm going to graduate and it'd be nice to have a place to live in DC for a couple of months until I figure out what's going on, let the lease start in August. But unless somebody's going to give you a 9 or 10-month lease, you're going to end up having a couple of months on that lease that you may not, the apartment may not be used. I will say, in Henry's experience, when he had a semester to go before he was going to be going abroad, he went and was prepared to negotiate a 6-month extension. And his landlord told him, this was Greenbrier, landlord told him that he could go month to month as long as he needed to, and they would keep the same rate he had been paying for the 12-month lease.
Makes sense. Let's see, I'm looking. Sarah, do you see any questions you think we haven't hit yet? I think fortunately most of these we've covered. As you can see, if you do have other further questions, you're welcome to email housing, dean of students, or AU parent for general questions. Always happy to help you. And the recording of this session will go up on YouTube, and we'll share that link with all of you, so you'll have plenty of time to review and go back through and look at all these resources that have come up. But yeah, for any of our presenters, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share before maybe we call it for the evening?
I'd like to throw out a question that I saw answered, and I know y'all could answer better than I could. But there are some concerns about when you move off campus, what happens if you're doing loans or you have any sort of aid? How does that aid transfer to the off-campus world?
That's a good question. Kaylee or Justin, do you have good perspective on that?
I can try to answer. I do not work in financial aid or student accounts, but my understanding is that when students are awarded aid beyond their tuition and, if they have a meal plan, things that would be charged to AU, then there's a balance that is then refunded to the student, and then the student is able to use that for whatever the living expenses are that they were budgeted for. So if that's off-campus housing, then they would just wait for that refund and use that money to pay the landlord directly.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, I think if you have more questions on that, you could definitely also reach out to the financial aid office. Their email's financialaid@american.edu. If you search them up, they'll come right up. They have great counselors, and I think every student has a personal counselor who hopefully could maybe figure out the details for a particular situation too. Let's see. Yeah, I think we might be in good shape here. Yeah, any last things from our presenters? If not, I just want to thank you so much to our presenters for being here, and thank you to all our parents for coming and attending. We really appreciate you being here and supporting your Eagles. Again, please feel free to reach out to us at AU Parent or at any of these various offices if you have further questions, and we'll be in touch with the recording as soon as it's available. And yeah, very much appreciate you being here, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.